As things escalate, we're shown a flashback involving a character named Vignal, who's practicing his magic. In his mind, he's frustrated because he's struggling with his abilities. He recalls moments from his past, where he felt left behind by others, especially a girl named Eleanor. He's trying desperately to keep up with her, to not be left behind. But he feels his magic isn't good enough, and he's never going to reach her level. Despite his efforts, his magic tends to fade quickly, leaving him feeling like a failure. He can't accept that he'll never be good enough, and he resolves to push himself harder. Vignal reflects on how he feels like an outsider in the academy because he's the only elf left in the 6th year. All the other elves had already made it to the tower, a mark of success that he has yet to achieve. He feels talentless, a burden to others, and his peers have reminded him of this time and time again. But his frustration isn't just about feeling inadequate. He's particularly troubled because elves have the ability to manifest their illusion magic into physical form. It's something he hasn't been able to master, and this makes him feel like even more of a failure. Will, however, reassures him, saying that he's one of the top 3 students in their batch, despite what Vignal believes about himself. At the same time, Liana, another character, expresses her own doubts. She tells her companions that if someone had true talent, they would have reached the tower before the graduation process even began. She reflects on how, for the last 6 years, she's only watched other talented students pass her by. Compared to them, she feels like nothing but trash. However, her friend Colette tries to reassure her, calling her skilled and reminding her that everyone at the academy calls her Miss Perfect. Liana counters by explaining that they're only considered talented within the academy, which is just a small pond. Outside, in the real world, they would be nothing but small fish. She recalls seeing a peer of hers, Magia Winder, ascend to become a true genius. This realization made her believe that she and others like her would never reach such heights. Will reassures him, saying it's okay to fail. They aren't geniuses, so failing is part of the process. Vignal is still hesitant, worried that his failure could get them all killed. But Will promises him that he won't die because he has dreams waiting for him, and he's determined to meet someone important at the tower. Will's determination inspires Vignal, and he decides to give it his all. As Will starts fighting the monsters, Vignal watches, amazed by Will's endurance. He can't understand how Will is able to keep going, even after battling so many enemies. Will defeats a giant snake and 2 other monsters, but Vignal is still frozen in fear. He knows his magic isn't perfect, but he resolves to try. He launches an attack with his illusion magic, but as expected, it fails. Vignal begins to spiral, convinced he's a failure. Just as the monsters close in on Will, Vignal realizes that he can't let Will down. Will believes in him, and that belief sparks something in Vignal. He summons his illusion magic again, and this time, it works. The monsters are defeated, and Will praises Vignal for his success. Overwhelmed, Vignal apologizes for doubting himself and thanks Will for always believing in him. They shake hands, and it's a turning point for Vignal. He's no longer the insecure elf he once was. He's ready to face whatever challenges come next, alongside Will. Meanwhile, Colette has been leaving marks to help Will and Vignal find their way. She's anxious, knowing that they don't have much food and water left, and that the monsters aren't giving them any time to rest. They've been trapped on the 10th floor for 16 hours. Liana blames herself for rushing into the situation and putting everyone in danger, but Colette reassures her that it wasn't her fault. She promises that Will come to save them. At this point, Will and Vignal reunite with Cheyenne and Julius, who have been fighting off evil sentinels. They are impressed by the destruction the group has caused, and Julius jokes about how many clones he sacrificed to keep the enemies at bay. Just when it seems like things are calming down, the professors, Edward and Vulcan, arrive at the scene. They reveal that Liana's team was headed for the 10th floor and that Will and his companions are now on the 11th floor. Meanwhile, on the 10th floor, Liana and her team are barely surviving. Colette, who has been marking the walls to help Will find them, sits anxiously, staring into the dark tunnels. Her intuition tells her that Will is near. She's always had a strong sense for these things, and despite the overwhelming odds, she's confident that rescue is on the way. Liana, on the other hand, is racked with guilt. She blames herself for rushing the team into the 10th floor without a solid plan. In her mind, her ambition and desire to prove herself have led them into this near-death situation. But Colette, ever the optimist, reassures her. Will is coming. He's always got our back. This simple statement gives Liana a small glimmer of hope, but she can't shake the feeling that they're running out of time. The monsters are getting more aggressive, their resources are dwindling, and fatigue is setting in. They can't hold out much longer. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, they reach the 10th floor. Colette's intuition was right. Will and his team arrive just in time. Liana and the others are battered and exhausted, but they're alive. The reunion is emotional. Liana, who had been so consumed with guilt, can't believe that Will actually came for them. Colette's eyes fill with tears as she embraces Will, thankful beyond words. Vignal, too, feels a sense of accomplishment that he's never experienced before. But there's no time to rest. The dungeon is still collapsing, and they need to escape before they're buried alive. Will rallies the group, and together they make a final dash for the exit. In the final moments, as they emerge from the dungeon into the open air, there's a brief moment of silence. The weight of what they've just survived sinks in. Everyone is exhausted, but alive. Vignal, in particular, feels an overwhelming sense of pride. He's no longer the insecure elf who doubted his abilities. He's proven, not just to his friends but to himself, that he's capable of greatness. Will, ever the leader, smiles at his team. They've come a long way, and they know that even greater challenges lie ahead. But for now, they can rest, knowing they've conquered the dungeon together.